People said this guy would hunt anything with a heartbeat. Hi guys, welcome to True Crime with Bergen. It is 2026. Happy New Year. This is my first video of the new year, and I am so excited because I'm finally officially bringing back my podcasts and YouTube videos. It's been a while. I was pregnant, I was tired, and then I became a new mom. And between finishing my bachelor's degree and being a mom, I did not have time to do podcasts and YouTube. But I graduated, we're out of the newborn phase, and I'm ready to be bringing you guys regular episodes again. Right now, the plan is to be bringing you a new episode every 2 weeks. This is the first one, and I'm just so excited to be back telling you guys stories. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you so much for listening or watching, however you might be getting this content. If you're not new here or you're from TikTok, I love and appreciate you guys for sticking with me in this last year. It's been one of the craziest years of my life. Let me know where you guys are watching from in the comments. I love hearing a little bit about you guys, hearing where you're from. As you guys know, I'm from Alaska, but I now live in North Carolina. Today is an absolutely insane case. I have told this one on my TikTok. It was at the very beginning of everything, and it's a heavy one. It's a lot. It's absolutely insane. And he also was in Alaska for a while. And so I grew up hearing about him, and he's terrifying. And today I'm going to be telling you guys about Isreal Keys. People said this guy would hunt anything with a heartbeat. That is how scary he is. Serial killer barely even scrapes the surface of how bad of a dude this was. So grab a coffee, grab a snack. We're getting right into the story. I have a giant coffee because I've been filming literally all day, but we're just going to get right into it. This guy was an arsonist. He assaulted people. He kidnapped people. He killed not only adults, but children as well. He even dressed up one of his deceased victims, put makeup on them to make them look alive so that he could get more money out of the victim's family. And on top of all of that, he's a serial killer. An absolutely diabolically evil, disgusting, horrible man. So starting at the very beginning of his life, Isreal Keys had like a very tough childhood. He grew up in a super strict religious, controlling household in Utah, no less. His family was LDS, and they even went to a church called the Ark. That alone sounds culty. And then on top of that, they were accused of white supremacy. So just red flags all around. While they are going to church, Isreal and his family actually becomes friends with a guy named Chevy Cajo, which, if you don't know who that is, he is currently serving 3 life sentences for torturing and brutally murdering an entire family. So it sounds like this church is just a breeding ground for evil people, either trying to clear their conscience or using the church as either a hunting ground or an enabling environment for their evil behavior. His entire family had some stuff. The kids were all kind of known to get in trouble. His parents were very strict and controlling, but in weird ways. They were very strict and controlling about religion, but they didn't really seem to care about the kids when it came to actually raising them. The kids literally slept outside in tents because their cabin was too small for them to all fit inside. So the parents got to sleep inside in a cushy, warm cabin, and the kids slept outside. And a lot of times they had to fend for themselves for food, for shelter, for water. They just didn't care about their kids' basic needs. They didn't nurture them. They didn't love them. They barely fed them. They just didn't seem to be that good of parents. But then they were super strict and controlling about religion. So a really weird, not healthy way to grow up for a child. And of course, all the kids craved the approval of their parents and basically never got it. And so that just makes it even worse when Isreal grows up to be very violent and not a very good kid. He not only would pick on his siblings and the kids in the neighborhood and shoot guns into his neighbors' houses and literally start fires. He also would play with roadkill and torture animals and then make the kids in the neighborhoods watch him torture animals until they threw up. He collected guns and literally created a secret gun cache when he was a kid, and his parents made him return all of those. But honestly, they still didn't seem that concerned that he was stealing people's guns. There were so many signs that this kid was violent and unhealthy and mentally unstable, and they just ignored them because all that mattered to them was religion. As he got older, he started to doubt a lot of their really religious rules and very strict lifestyle. And he ended up telling them that he didn't believe in what they believed. He wasn't religious like them. And as a result, they decided to kick him out of their house, which is already traumatic for a kid. I think he was about 16 when this happened. So when he told them he didn't agree with their religious beliefs and they kicked him out, that just crushed all hopes that they would ever approve of anything he did. So This pretty much devastated him and it turned his world upside down. And he ends up practicing Satanism and he starts embracing his violent tendencies and, bad behavior even more. He decided that he really wanted to have a ritualistic murder. That was his goal. Less than 18 years old, he already has a goal to murder someone in a ritualistic way. That's horrific. And one of the scary things about Israel Keys as we kind of get into the story is that he was very smart about crossing state lines and not targeting too many people in one area. And then on top of that, unlike many serial killers who stick to like one mode of operation, he did whatever he wanted to whoever he wanted. He literally would hunt anything with a heartbeat. He was the epitome of that phrase. And so it's hard to track his patterns. It's hard to know who he was going to kill next. And when we look back now, it's hard to know who he actually killed. So a lot of the people I'm going to be talking about are his supposed victims, his assumed victims, but on paper, they've never been completely proven. We know for a fact he killed a couple of these people, and I'll talk about those as well. But I'm going to be covering many people we think he killed, but we just in court legally have not deemed that he was the killer. We have not actually been able to charge him for these murders and assaults. It really started in 1996. In early March, a young girl, she's only 12 years old. Her name is Julie Marie Harris. She just goes missing. She vanishes. And Julie actually was a medalist in the Special Olympics, so many people in the area and community knew who she was. She was a double amputee and used prosthetics, and after she goes missing about a month later, her prosthetic feet and her purse ended up in a river, and that's obviously not a good sign. It kind of solidified a lot of people's worst fears that Julie was killed by someone. And the following year, her body was discovered. Her body ended up being found in the woods a few miles away, and an autopsy was not able to completely determine cause of death, but we do know that she had been killed, and Israel, who was 18 at the time, lived in the area that she was found. And so he actually was questioned by the police, but so were a lot of people. And unfortunately, they just didn't have enough to get Israel on it. And there wasn't really any evidence to concretely say who did this. And so her death is actually still unsolved to this day. Her stepdad was also a suspect in the murder, and it could be that he killed her instead, but it is mostly believed that Israel is the one who killed her, and he was using her as his first victim to practice on her. So now, about a year later, we're flashing forward to June of 1997. Marlene K. Emerson, she was 29 years old. She was found dead in the burnt remnants of her home. It was a trailer home, and it had caught on fire and burned completely to the ground. Marlene, obviously, like I said, was inside, but her 12-year-old daughter, her name was Cassandra Emerson, was not found in the fire. She was not with family, she was not with friends, and she was not in school. And they couldn't find her remains anywhere in the crime scene, meaning she was missing. And so they declared her as a missing person, and they searched everywhere for this 12-year-old little girl, and they could not find her. It wasn't until the following year, 13 miles from her home, very close to where Israel Keys is living at this point, that they find her body, and it's clear that she was killed. And I have to say, later when they question Israel, he does say that he had been in the trailer, but he never admits to their death. He was named a suspect in their deaths. However, last time I told the story, because I told this story on my TikTok, I think almost a year ago, I said that Israel Keys seemed to be the main suspect. However, apparently in December of 2024, there was another man who actually was arrested for the murders. His name was Charles Tatum. He was about 70 when he was arrested. So he was probably somewhere around 45 to 50 when this all happened. And he lived in the area and they thought he might be the murderer. So he has now since been arrested for the murders. So it might be that Israel didn't actually kill them and this Charles guy did. We don't know for sure. So in 1997, when he was about 20 years old, Israel ends up moving to Oregon. And this is where he assaults a teenage girl at a river. He is out and about for the day and he sees her tubing along this river with some friends. He saw her, and I don't know what it was about this girl specifically as opposed to her friends that drew him to her, but he decided he wanted to take her for his own. So he actually stalks her in the woods and follows her along this river for a while. And then when he sees an opportunity, he grabs her and pulls her into the woods. And I don't know how the friends didn't see it. I'm not sure if it was while she was changing or what, but he ends up getting her alone. He assaults her and he's getting ready to murder her. He decides that she's going to be the ritualistic murder that he's been dreaming of. But for whatever reason, and he describes it as a moment of weakness, He doesn't kill her. He hesitates and ends up letting her go. And we actually, to this day, do not know who this girl is. She was never identified. No one came forward. We only know about this from Isreal describing it many years later after he was caught. And he said in his interrogations that in that moment, he felt like it was a moment of weakness and that he decided he was never going to let himself have a moment of weakness again. He said, quote, "I was too timid. I wasn't violent enough. I made up my mind I was never going to let that happen again," end quote. In the fall of 1997, he ends up moving from Oregon to Albany, New York. And soon after he moves there, a young girl named Suzanne Lyle disappears from Albany. She was only 19 years old when she disappeared on March 22nd. She had left her job at a computer store, and it's believed that she took the bus from her work to the university campus. A witness came forward and said they saw her getting off the bus on campus, but she never made it to her dorm. So somewhere between her bus dropping her off and her walk to her dorm, she disappeared. Her body has never been found. And it could be a coincidence that she goes missing at the same time that Isreal flies into her state, but it seems pretty unlikely. And I, for one, don't really believe it's a coincidence. While the police were investigating her case, they learned that her ATM card was used to withdraw money after she went missing. And her boyfriend at the time, who was cleared of this, said that the only two people that had her ATM pin were her and her boyfriend. And he's like, I don't think she would have just given that to anyone. And so obviously they're thinking that someone took her for money and then killed her. And we know that money is a huge thing for Israel Keys. That is like what motivates like half of his crimes. He literally, I'm going to tell you about some of his bank robberies later. And so he was very motivated by money. So it seems pretty likely that he is involved in Suzanne Lyle's disappearance. In July of 1998, he ended up enlisting in the U.S. Army. And while he is deployed in Egypt, he and his buddies end up actually getting a suite at a hotel. And I don't really understand how this situation went down, but the hotel owner basically brought them an S worker and said, here you go. I guess because they got their biggest suite or because they paid money. I'm not really sure why, but he brought them an S worker. And this girl, like, she wasn't new to S work. She had been doing it for quite some time. So she had seen a lot of things. But she goes to the back room with Isreal, and less than 30 minutes later, she comes screaming, running out of there, saying, like, don't let me go back to him. And people were asking her what was going on, and she would not tell them. She just begged them not to let her go back to Isreal. For someone who has experience in the work that she does, she has seen things. She would not be running out for just anything. He had to be doing stuff that was absolutely terrible to scare her off this bad. She never said what he did, and he just said he wanted to leave it alone and that she was being dramatic. So we don't really know exactly what happened in Egypt. But we do know he was drunk a lot, he was violent, and he would try to hire S workers a lot, and many of them did not have nice things to say about him. He has said he never killed anyone while he was deployed in Egypt, but I don't know if I believe that. When he was back from Egypt, before he ended up getting discharged from the army, he also was burglarizing like different homes in the area, and it's estimated that he was robbing and burglarizing as many as 20 to 30 homes during this time, which is an insane amount. That's a lot of houses to be breaking into and not get caught. And so he's just like devolving, getting more violent, more dangerous, more careless, and he's just escalating in basically every single way you can. And at one point, he ends up getting a DUI, he gets caught drinking, and he gets discharged from the army. So after getting discharged, he's still heavily drinking, and he ends up living near Nia Bay in Washington, and he ends up getting a girlfriend, and they end up having a child. Soon after they move to the area of Nia Bay, one of his neighbors just randomly goes missing. Again, I don't think that's a coincidence. The neighbor's body turns up later, and he had been strangled. His death was ruled an accident, but I don't understand how someone else strangling you means it's an accident. Those things don't add up. It doesn't make sense to me. So for whatever reason, it wasn't ruled a homicide, and no one even like considered Isreal as like a part of this. He had been violent in his past, but he didn't really have like a criminal record of his violence. No one really knew some of the stuff he was capable of doing. On November 21st of 2001, still he's living in Washington at this point, a young couple went beachcombing and tide pooling near Depot Bay, and they were 16-year-old Cami Vollendroff and her 18-year-old boyfriend, Eugene Hyatt. And they were last seen in the area of Boiler Bay by some witnesses, and then all of a sudden they vanished. They never came home, and they are still considered missing persons to this day. Of course, we have to, because they're next to the ocean, we have to talk about the possibility that they fell in, drowned, got swept out to sea by a rogue wave. Like, all of these things are possible. And some other people have the theory that they were just runaways. They wanted to be together, they ran away. And so, of course, there are possibilities that Isreal was not involved in their death. However, that doesn't seem to be the popular opinion. Most people, from what I saw online, think that Isreal was involved. Of course, there are many different serial killers in the area around this time frame. Gary Ridgway, Dayton Leroy Rogers, Israel Keys. Like, we now know about many different serial killers, so they could have been a victim of someone else's as well. But again, it seems like Israel likely killed these kids. In 2004, Israel is still living in Washington, and an indigenous woman named Alice Ida Looney also goes missing. Her body was found a year later, wedged in a tree. That's not a position you put yourself in, so it seems likely she was killed and dumped there. She was 37 at the time she was killed, and she was described as someone who loved her family. She was kind and sensitive and a light to literally all that knew her, and it's absolutely devastating that someone cut her life short. Some sources say that he might have been ruled out, but I wanted to include her because when I was looking at possible victims of his, her name came up multiple times. In 2007, though, the FBI took jurisdiction over Alice's case along with 15 other Native American women who went missing or were murdered near the area in Washington. And the investigation lasted 2 years, and they found that 10 of the cases were homicides. And they say that they weren't linked in any way and that they weren't linked to a serial killer, but they said Alice's case was determined to be inconclusive. And so I don't know if the FBI thinks Israel Keys is involved, but the internet does. Another woman named Kimberly Ann Forbes went missing in October of 2004 from Hood River in Oregon. Obviously, Oregon is right next to Washington, and he is known to cross state lines, so it's not crazy to think he would be killing Washington and Oregon simultaneously. She was 48 years old, and she disappeared, and her car was later found abandoned with the window smashed in. It seemed pretty clear she was probably attacked. She has never been seen again and is still considered a missing person. There is a theory, obviously, that Israel is very much involved in her disappearance as well. And in March of 2005, a man named Delmar Wayne Sample also went missing from Washington. He was 53 years old, and he vanished after getting gas and heading to go out on a hike. Park rangers ended up finding his car, but they never found him. Now, it's possible that he got lost or fell and got injured and just couldn't get back to get help. And he's just never been found in the expansive wilderness of Oregon and Washington. But it's also possible he was the victim of a serial killer like Israel. Another potential victim was Wendy D. Hoop. She disappeared on April 22nd of 2005. She was a mom and a wife, and she was reliable. She cared about her job, and she would not just disappear. So when she suddenly was a no-show at work, everyone, including her coworkers, were concerned. A neighbor said they saw her that morning alive and well at 7 a.m., but she never made it to work. Her car was found, and there's suspicion that maybe her husband killed her, but it sounds like he's more or less been cleared. I don't know if that's like 100%, but now it seems more likely that Israel killed her, especially because we know that the same week that she went missing, Israel bought a boat nearby. Later, when he got caught and he was confessing some things, he said that he bought the boat and used it to dump people, and he admitted to dumping at least 2 different victims with that boat. And so many people think Wendy was one of those 2 victims. After this, after he spent some time in Washington and Oregon, he ends up moving up to Alaska with his daughter. And it is here in Alaska that he starts a construction business. On October 27th, so pretty much right after he moved to Alaska, a woman named Sheila Kathy McBroom disappeared from Anchorage, Alaska. She was last seen on October 27th by a trooper when she was seen driving erratically and was pulled over. They thought maybe she was drinking and driving. They'd make her take a sobriety test, and she passes and says, "I'm just tired." So they say, "Why don't you pull over, take a nap, and then keep driving?" Because if you guys know anything about Alaska, our highways are not the best, and Seward Highway is not the safest either. And so they say, pull over, take a nap, and then you can keep going. A couple days later, they find her car abandoned, and there's no signs of her, and she's never been seen again. So some people think she was Israel's first victim. He was likely driving along the highway, saw her on the side of the road napping, and attacked her or used some sort of ruse to kidnap her. After this, in April of 2009, he is traveling for work, I think. I don't know if he said it was for work or if he said it was just for fun, but for whatever reason, he's traveling and he goes to New Jersey. And at the exact same time he's in New Jersey, a woman named Deborah Feldman vanishes. To this day, her body has never been recovered. Her bank accounts were never accessed, so it seems unlikely that she moved or tried to start over somewhere else. In later interviews with Israel at one point, and remember that he loves to taunt the police, he loves to taunt families and like the families of victims. He loves to give very vague information as like breadcrumbs to tease people, but not actually ever admit to something. So he says that he took a woman, but he doesn't say if it was Deborah for sure. And then when he was asked directly about her, he would just say, "I don't want to talk about it." However, they saw on his search history, he had searched her name and her missing persons case many times. And when I say many, I mean like so many that it's clear he had to be involved. Like there's no way he's not. He searched her hundreds of times. That's not something an innocent person or an uninvolved person would do. So I think he definitely killed Deborah Feldman. On April 10th, so the day after he potentially killed Deborah, he goes and robs a bank in New York. And to flee, he goes and hides on a campground nearby to lay low for a couple days. And then once they don't catch him, he escapes and he goes back to Alaska. Later on, he ends up wanting to go visit his mom in Indiana. So he flies from Alaska to Chicago and then drives to Indiana to see her. His plan was to stay with her for like 3 to 4, maybe even 5 days. And when he gets there, he arrives on June 2nd. On the morning of June 3rd, so immediately after he ends up in Indiana, a girl named Lauren Spear vanishes. She had been out drinking with friends. She was texting her boyfriend throughout the entire night, but at 4 a.m., someone texts her and her phone is found at the bar and someone texts and says like, hey, she's not here anymore. And we have no idea when she disappeared from the bar. She's never been seen again and she was reported missing. There are obviously a ton of theories as to where she went, why she went missing. Maybe she was drunk, maybe she overdosed, maybe someone roofied her, maybe she fell into a river, but also maybe someone killed her. Some people think another killer named Daniel Massel actually killed her. Others think that it was Isreal because it can't be a coincidence that the moment Isreal is in town, someone goes missing and it's a young girl. That can't be a coincidence over and over again. And so she goes missing on June 3rd. He stays with his mom for a few days. And on the 8th, he leaves his mom's house. He rents a car, drives to Vermont, over 900 miles away. By the way, up until this point, most of his victims I've told you about, they are theories. I kind of mentioned that before, but like we don't have concrete evidence that he killed them. But this next situation, 110% we know he killed these two people. So he drives to Vermont, 900 miles away, and he gets to the house of Bill and Lorraine Courier. And they were a married couple in their 50s. And after he shows up at their house, the next day, neither one of them shows up for work. And eventually they are reported missing. The police end up investigating, but they have no idea where they have gone. They have no sign of, like, if they ran away, if they were kidnapped, if they got hurt. Like, they don't know. Again, because Israel's crossing state lines, we don't have, like, national databases the same way. No one knew that Israel was even in Vermont. No one knew he was doing all of these things, so he was not on the police's radar. So this couple goes missing. They look into it, but they have no idea. So their case actually goes unsolved for a while. And it isn't until years later, when Isreal is arrested for something else, that he ends up admitting he killed Bill and Lorraine. So years and years later, we find out that he says that he tied them up, kidnapped them, and drove them to an abandoned farmhouse in the middle of the woods. He said he tortured Lorraine for hours and killed them both. To this day, we don't know what happened to their bodies, even with his confession. All of the victims I've talked about so far, because they're supposed, I was like, maybe he killed some of these people, but maybe not all of them. Like, that is a lot to be killing in New Jersey and Indiana and Alaska and then Oregon and Washington. Like, there's a lot of states he's covering. So I don't know if he's doing all of this. That seems like a lot for one person to be doing. Until I heard this information. He had kill kits all over the country. Basically, he would get whatever he needed to murder people, torture, assault them, whatever he wanted, and he would hide them all over the country so that wherever he traveled, if he decided he wanted to kill, he could just dig one up, use it, kill people, put it back, and he never had to go to the store, he never had to buy supplies, so he would remain undetected in that state and probably the states around it, and then just go home to Alaska and act like nothing happened. And we know of at least 12 confirmed kits, but likely there's way more and he just never told the police about them. There could be a kill kit like underneath the ground we're walking on every day and we would not know. But what we do know is the one that he had in Vermont that was near where Bill and Lorraine lived, he had buried that 2 years before, meaning for at least 2 years he had plan on killing someone in Vermont. Whether or not it was Bill and Lorraine, like if that was his plan, or if they were just victims of opportunity, I don't know. But he was planning on killing someone in Vermont for at least 2 years. So now I want to tell you guys about something else that we're pretty sure Isreal was involved in, but we haven't been able to prove it 100%. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Boca Killer. That is a person who murdered multiple people in Boca Raton near a mall in Florida in early 2007. So the Boca Raton killer committed 3 different crimes in Florida. This is around the time that Isreal is traveling all over, especially in the East Coast. So it's not unlikely that he was in Florida. The killer every single time wore sunglasses and a mask. And by the way, this sketch of the Boca Raton killer looks a whole lot like this photo of Isreal Keys robbing a bank in New York. I'm just saying. So the Boca Killer on March 23rd, 23rd of 2007, a woman named Randy Gornberg was headed to the mall. She bought a CD and then left the mall, and we see her leave the mall on security footage. But then 45 minutes later, someone calls 911 saying they hear gunshots and they see someone getting shoved out of a moving vehicle in a drive-thru at an ATM parking lot, which ATMs are all over every single mall parking lot. And they see her get shoved out of this car, and it seems like someone was trying to rob her, and then either she didn't have enough money or she wouldn't give up her ATM code, and so they dumped her. This was obviously very traumatic and horrific for the community in Boca Raton. People in Florida were terrified. But for 5 months, nothing else like this happened until one day a mother and her son, they are unnamed, I don't know their identities, they went to the mall and they're going to do some shopping. And as they're leaving, she puts her son in the back seat and is putting stuff in the car and then gets in the front. And at some point while she was loading things up and getting in the car, a man had gotten into her car in the passenger side and pulls a gun on her. And for 45 minutes, he made her drive around to different ATMs and pull out money. And she said that the guy didn't really seem like he was from the area because he kept getting lost. He kept saying road names wrong. And he didn't seem like someone who was local. And she said that she was terrified because she remembers every single time they pull up to an ATM and she'd go to pull out money, she was worried their car was going to decline or he was going to think he got enough and he was going to shoot and kill them right there. But after a while, he ends up blindfolding her and restrains her and he starts to drive. She's terrified. He's scary. He's got a gun. She's thinking he's going to kill her. But one thing that was really strange is he was super nice to her son. At one point, her son is crying, and the guy asks if he needs a bottle or water. He's checking on the kid, making sure he's fine. He's not being violent towards the child. Eventually, he ends up dropping them off, and he runs off. And she ends up telling the police. And at first, the police don't even believe her because that's kind of an insane story. But they do, and she and her son end up being okay, and they move on. But that is now the second strike from what they think is the same guy. And then finally, he strikes for the final time, the third time on December 12th. Nancy Boccaccino and her 7-year-old daughter, Joey, went to the mall to go Christmas shopping. And we know she was on the phone with her sister when they got to the mall, and they were talking about all the things they needed to get for Christmas. But later that night, her family's getting ready for dinner, and they're waiting on Nancy and Joey to get back, and they're surprised that shopping at the mall would take this long. They weren't planning on being there this long. They're waiting for them at dinner. They start calling Nancy, and she is not answering, and they start to get worried. Little do they know that Nancy and Joey probably barely did any Christmas shopping at all. They were kidnapped from the mall and taken to an ATM to withdraw money. And at about midnight that night, after their family realizes something is wrong, a security guard finds their car idling, and inside, both Nancy and her 7-year-old daughter were bound and shot to death. And Joey had been shot in the face. So all 3 cases were believed to be committed by the same person. And again, he was called the Boca Killer. And it is pretty firmly believed that this was Isreal Keys when he was traveling from Florida. It's just insanity. But that's how scary and dangerous Isreal Keys was. Unfortunately, just like in Vermont, Isreal is not on the radar with the police. The police do not think that Isreal's involved because they don't even know he exists or was in Florida. And so at the time, the Boca Killer is not caught, and to this day, that is still considered unsolved. On February 15th of 2012, James Tidwell, who was 58 years old, was last seen in Texas after leaving work around 5 a.m. And he was a construction worker. He was wearing a white construction hat when he left work. And we know that Isreal was in Texas around this time, and I'll tell you why we know that in a second. The next day, and this is the reason we think that Isreal killed him, Isreal, on February 16th, robs a bank in Texas, and he is wearing a white hard hat with dark hair underneath. And years later, when he's caught and he's asked about this particular case and robbery, he said that it wasn't a wig that he was wearing, and he said, "You don't have to buy real hair to get real hair." Again, implying his involvement, implying he killed James, but never fully admitting it. Now I'm going to tell you guys about the crime that he's probably most famously known for, and this is what led to him being caught, essentially. So remember, he's been living in Alaska this whole time, and he's just been traveling all over the country. And on February 1st, so right before he would have gone to Texas and killed James, a woman named Samantha Tesla Coing was working at a coffee shop. And I don't know if you're familiar with the coffee shops in Alaska. They're very popular to have drive-thrus on each side of a little tiny coffee hut. There's one on every single corner of our tiny little towns. I actually worked at one for 2 years, and it was a great job. But a lot of times there's only 1 or 2 people working in these coffee huts at a time, depending on the shift that you have. And I worked alone a lot in these coffee shops, and they're tiny. So there's not really any place to hide if someone comes up to you in a ski mask with a gun. And that's exactly what happened to Samantha. She was working at one of these coffee shops, and Isreal Keys came up to her with a gun, He's wearing a ski mask and he abducts her. He takes her debit cards, he takes her money, and then he holds her for an entire day. He assaults her, he hurts her, he tortures her, and then he kills her. And then he puts her body in a shed in the backyard, and then he leaves for a trip. He goes on a cruise to New Orleans, and then he goes to Texas, kills James, does that robbery in Texas, and then he flies back to Alaska. So her body is in that shed for at least 2 weeks while he's traveling, and I'm pretty sure this is the house that his kid lived in. So I don't know why he would have just put a body in the shed. Clearly, he did not care about who he affected or who he hurt, including his own family. So after he gets back, he decides that the money he got from the Texas robbery was not enough, and he wants ransom money for Samantha because while he's been gone, everyone's been frantically looking for Samantha. And I cannot imagine what her family was feeling during this time. I mean, obviously they're hopeful that she's alive, but it's been weeks at this point and they're probably starting to lose hope. And then all of a sudden they get a message or they get a notice that she's alive and that if they pay some money, they can get her back. Because what he did is he took her body out of the shed, he put makeup on her, and he made it look like she was alive. He posed her with newspaper from a couple days before, so it seemed like she'd been alive for the past couple weeks. And then he said he wanted a ransom. The family, of course, is thinking there's a chance their daughter's alive. Of course, we'll pay whatever. And so they send money. And I feel so terrible for them that they probably were losing hope. They get this glimmer of hope that maybe she's alive just to find out that she was dead in that photo and they had no idea. So they end up wiring him the money based on whatever instructions he gave them, and he immediately dumps her body in the Matanuska Lake. The only positive is that because he's a dummy when it comes to this, he doesn't realize that they can track whoever withdraws the money. So he goes and withdraws the money from the ransom wire, and they're able to see that it was Isreal Keys, and they track him down. And it takes a few days for them to build a case and like really find out that it's him. But once they do, they go to arrest him, and he's already in Texas. And so they end up getting people in Texas to arrest him. They extradite him back to Alaska. And so he's arrested. He's sent to prison. He's charged with her murder. And he's sent to prison for life. He is going to spend the rest of his life in jail. And as they're doing this, they start looking at his past to build a case on him. And they start realizing, like, this was not the only time he's killed someone. This man is a terrifying serial killer. And he's killed at least 11 people, if not more. And they get him to confess some things. He talks about some of his crimes. Again, he kind of taunts at some things and he never fully comes out and admits things. But they think that he killed at least 11 people, if not more. Again, he was sentenced to prison. And in 2013, he ended up dying by taking his own life. And so unfortunately, we will never get more answers from him. It sounds like he was never going to fully give us answers, but there was hope that if he was alive and he kept giving breadcrumbs of information, we could kind of piece together some things if he like slipped up or accidentally said too much. But obviously that won't happen now. So there are so many other people and other theories out there that Isreal could have killed other people. And again, he had 12 kill kits across the country. So he probably killed way more people in way more states than I even mentioned. There are more theories online. I just kind of mentioned the ones that are the most, I don't want to say popular, but the most believed, basically. Either way, he was a terrifying guy. He got away with so much for so long, and it's very unfortunate that he wasn't caught sooner. And now with national databases and stuff like that, it is harder for someone to get away with something across state lines, but like really, there are still people that could be doing exactly this thing, crossing state lines and killing people, and we would have no idea. That is it for the story about Isreal Keys and all the horrific things that he has done. He was a terrifying, disgusting human. But I do just want to say thank you guys so much for listening on YouTube or my podcast or wherever you're getting this from. I love you all so much. Thank you for supporting me. And if you're not already on TikTok, I'd love to see you over there too. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you in the next video. Happy New Year. I love you all so much.